Let's see the try and catch block. First, here's the general form. A try block that contains a block of code to be tried, and a catch block that contains the block of code to handle the errors. So if the code in the try block throws an exception, the catch block for the type of the exception thrown is executed. If there is no catch block for the type of exception thrown, the exception is handled elsewhere, which we will discuss later. If the code in the try block does not throw any exceptions, no catch block is executed. So let's see an example with the try and catch block. So here we have a public class called myClass, which has an array of integers 1 to 3, and a println which will print my numbers of index 10. So this will generate an error because my number of 10 does not exist. It only contains 0, 1, and 2 indexes. If an error occurs, we can use try and catch to catch the error and execute some code to handle it. So let's rewrite the same class with try and catch. So we'll put the line of code that we think may throw an exception into the try block, and then followed by a catch block. And in the catch block we'll do something, which in this case will print something went wrong. Alright, so this program will print something went wrong because in the line where we try to print my numbers 10, it actually throw an error, and we catch it with the catch block and did something and move on. So let's see this example in the editor. So let's look at this example, try demo, and here we have an array of integers, my numbers, which will have 1, 2, and 3, and in the line 5 we're going to try to access my numbers 10, and then let's see what happens. So first we're going to try to compile, see if the Java compiler will see an error. As you can see, it compiled without any errors, but if I try to run this, you're gonna see that it actually throw an exception in the thread main, and the type of the exception is array index out of bounds exception, and the explanation for this is that index 10 out of bounds for the length 3, and it also says that the line that caused the exception is line 5 in the try demo.java. If you look at line 5, that's where the problem occurred. So how do we prevent this program from crashing? Before we do, let's do one more line of code. Here we say after the error. Okay. So let's see, when the program crashed, we'll see whether this will be printed or not. So I'm going to recompile and then try. Notice that we didn't get this printout because we were never able to reach this line because the program crashed exactly at number 5. So how do we prevent this? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to write a try block, and we're going to put this code inside the try block. So let's make sure the indentations are correct. Okay, so then we can catch the exception with an exception object E, which I'll explain this later. And then so when I catch this exception, I want to do something. Since it's a very simple one, so I'm gonna say I am not sure exactly what's happening because E will not tell me exactly what's going on. I'm gonna say something went wrong. Okay, so let's see what happens now. I'm going to recompile and run. So first thing that we need to understand, the program didn't crash, so that's why we want to use the exceptions. So we want to make sure that our program doesn't crash. So it didn't, but what happened is that it actually threw an exception here, and we catch the exception with the catch block, and then we did something and we went on. So if I print something here, we can say after the try catch, which means that this is the last thing we do before the program is over. If this is printed out, that means our program was successfully executed. So let's see, something went wrong after the try and catch block. So since we know that this is index out of bounds exception, so instead of using the general exception object, we can actually use the more specific index out of bounds exception E, and then recompile the program and then run, and the same thing happened. We were able to catch the exception, and then we were able to print something went wrong, and then we went on with the program. However, since we know what the exception is, we don't have to say that something went wrong. We have two options. We can just print whatever the E exception is, and I'll see what type of error message we're going to get. And then we saw the previous first error that we saw, array index out of bounds exception, index 10 out of bounds for the length 3. So this is a little bit more lengthy print message. We want to be more specific and only print the message itself. We can say e.getMessage, and then only to print the error message. Here you go. So index 10 out of bounds for length 3. So if we change this to say 4, we will still get an exception, but this time the message will say that index 4 out of bounds. Okay, so if we are to say 2, what happens in this case? Here you go. So there's no exception, which means the part of the program in the try block went on just without any error. This was executed, and then we were able to print my number of 2, which was 3, and then it didn't throw an exception. So then we went on and printed this line, and then since there was no exception, so the catch block wasn't executed, and we went on with this line and printed after the try and catch.